the core ecological economics tribe. I'm just going to speak for a minute right now. Then Laura's going to show the film, and then I have about a 5-minute framing of solutions and how to think about this as ecological economists, and then we'll do questions. So I think orthodox economics has failed our culture as a framework for how to think about the human situation and the human future. So I decided to start a podcast talking to scientists, economists, activists, politicians about how the big picture fits together. And I decided to make a couple of 2-minute trailers for the podcast to welcome people and give them a framework. Well, those 2 minutes ended up being a 32-minute animated documentary, which was an unbelievable amount of work, I have to tell you. It was like college finals. Like, I was so happy when it was done, but then when it was done, I missed it. But we had 62 versions of the script, and there were 173 discrete scenes that each one had to be choreographed, and I had a team of people helping me. I'm quite happy with it, and I think Laura's going to roll it from her computer, and I'll be back afterwards.
Awesome. Thank you, Nate. So please bear with me. Our tech guru, Kyle, has instructed me on how to optimally do this on Zoom, and I did not get the chance to practice it beforehand. So we will try in real time here. Okay, go to advanced, share video. Let's do that. And then I can choose a video. You all are thrilled to hear me talking through this in real time, I'm sure. And found it. Here we go. And it won't let me do it that way. Okay, so I'm going to do it the traditional way.
If I could give a little bit of advice,
yes,
kind of running into an issue with this before is try to have, I believe you have to, if you're going to share a video, try to use the audio from your computer. And there is a way to do it when you share. I believe you go to screen sharing and then you go to advanced and you're going to share your, whatever the video is, and you can click on advanced and then you say computer audio. And I believe that should give you the best audio.
Thank you, Rigo. I just tried that and it, okay, it says share sound and optimize for video clips. So I think we should be okay. Let me try this now. And apologies for Kyle couldn't be here today. So
if it doesn't work, I know the whole script by heart and I can just do it like verbally.
No, it should be okay. All right. Can you guys see that now? And hear it?
We can see it. Yeah, we just heard it start.
Can't hear it yet.
Will be different from our expectations. The arc of human history informs the trajectory of our future. We need to know.
Can you all hear that?
Can hear it, but the screen is black.
Oh boy.
Yeah, the audio is there, but and we can see the Great Simplification screen, but it's black.
Okay. I apologize. I don't know why that is the case. Let me try something else here.
I know we would advise not to do it, but we could try it from YouTube.
That's what I'm going to try next, because I tried it the way I was supposed to, and apparently it's not working. And apologies, you got me instead of Kyle this morning. So let me pull it up while you talk amongst yourselves for just 2 minutes.
So I'll share in the chat in a few minutes, but there was a I don't know how many of you saw on CBS Morning News this past Sunday. They had a 5-minute animation, and this afternoon I'm talking to the creators of it. It was a guy from NPR and an animator called Meet the Fossils, and it was something extraordinary for a major network to host, because at the end of it, they said we are using 100 years worth of all the biomass alive on the earth every year in the form of ancient biomass. And I'm going to be talking to the animators and the NPR people about doing follow-ups. They're looking for funding, but it's getting close to telling the full story on CBS. So I was happy to see it.
Awesome. Okay, I have it pulled up on YouTube now. And again, apologies for this. I tried to do this the correct way, and I should have known that it was going to fail. So we will now watch it on YouTube, and I hope that's going to work. So let me try this one more time here. Can you all see and hear that now?
The
Yes.
world to come will be different from our expectations. The arc of human history informs the trajectory of our future. We need to know who we are and how we got here. The ecology, biology, and physics. To know which paths remain open to us and which lead to dead ends. 4.5 billion years ago, stardust coalesced to form a planet. 1 billion years later, simple life emerged. By 500 million years ago, a profusion of life had exploded on our blue-green planet. Fast forward to 66 million years ago, and dinosaurs were taken out by our planet's most recent mass extinction. And small shrew-like survivors continued an evolutionary line that would eventually become us. Of all our hominid ancestors, one species would ultimately remain, Homo sapiens, a creature variously curious, creative, kind, cruel, cooperative, competitive, combative, and clever. When Earth's climate warmed and stabilized around 10,000 years ago, Homo sapiens tribes who pivoted en masse to agriculture and pastoralism out-reproduced their hunter-gatherer cousins. Unbeknownst to them, and to most of us, this was a planet-changing event. Sustained by new agricultural surplus, these early humans slowly spread out around the globe, expanding trade and technology. For thousands of years, the average annual growth in the size of the human economy would be unnoticeable from one generation to the next. By the 16th century, however, more complex social organization and advanced navigational technology kick-started a unique period in human history. Yet even with these advances, human cultures remained powered by biomass and the muscles of humans and our draft animals, limiting growth. Until, in the early 19th century, 10,000 years after the agricultural revolution, humans discovered how to extract fossil energy and materials from under Earth's surface to boost their economies. This new discovery of geologically stored sunlight in the form of coal, oil, and gas changed everything. For the first time, human and animal labor played second fiddle to the power of these new energy sources. When combined with a machine, a gallon of gasoline could output the same work in a few minutes as a person laboring for an entire month. We increasingly replaced manual human tasks with machines at a tiny fraction of the cost. The result? Higher profits, higher wages, and cheaper goods. Sudden access to this bank account of stored carbon energy turbocharged our populations, access to goods, services, and technology, and quadrupled our economic growth rate. Yet humanity's great acceleration was still ahead. In the latter half of the 20th century, with this new power source and an upgrade from coal to higher quality liquid oil, the human economy's average growth rate doubled yet again, to now over 30 times what it had averaged during the last few thousand years. Compared to a global labor force of around 5 billion real humans, the machines and work powered by access to buried carbon energy added the equivalent power of 500 billion human workers. Access to these fossil energies and materials brought billions more humans into existence and brought billions more out of poverty, and led to the creation of new myths, institutions, and expectations. Our ancestors' lives were tightly linked to the natural flows of the earth, the sun, the rain, and the soil. But during this moonshot of growth and consumption, our fundamental tether to nature was first neglected and then forgotten. The main inputs to our economies were now mostly free. We merely had to pay for the cost of their extraction, not the cost of their creation, their true worth, nor their pollution. To our ancestors, the benefits from carbon energy would have appeared indistinguishable from magic. And instead of appreciating this giant one-time windfall, we developed stories that our newfound wealth and progress had emerged purely from human ingenuity. We had become energy blind. Energy is and always will be the currency of life. Animals were the first investors. Obtaining a larger energy surplus gives an animal a competitive advantage for survival and reproduction. This role of surplus energy is a core driver of the natural world and dictates what can and can't happen. We rarely think about it or talk about it, but we're all alive during the carbon pulse, the few hundred years where humans are drawing down Earth's energy battery millions of times faster than it was trickle-charged by daily photosynthesis. Fossil hydrocarbons, at a vast scale, have enormously increased the surplus energy available to human economies. Pulses, by definition, don't last forever. High-quality ores and energy deposits are now mostly things of the past. Plenty remains, but it's of lower quality and both more costly and ecologically destructive to extract. In nature, there are countless examples where energy exists, but the effort to obtain it is so large that the meal is effectively off the menu. In our lifetimes, society will have to redirect increasing amounts of our energy surplus towards obtaining the surplus itself, leaving less affordable energy to support many of our current economic activities. One day, the energy it will cost to extract energy will be so large it won't make sense to do so, even though resources remain. Energy depletion will act as a growing tax on human societies. In this unprecedented era of large surplus, we have excelled at combining energy and materials into technology and inventions that improve the human experience. New technology can allow us to use resources more efficiently, or it can transform natural flows into energy. But mostly, technology just creates new ways for humans to consume and builds higher future requirements for energy and materials. Things that are more complex require more energy. When we add nodes to a supply chain, each connection requires energy to maintain. The complexity of our globally interconnected system currently requires the equivalent of 170 billion light bulbs constantly turned on, burning brightly, powered by the carbon pulse. Even rebuildable technology that harnesses the sun and the wind grows our total consumption and has not yet reduced the use of carbon energy globally. Most people believe that money is real wealth, yet everything we spend money on requires energy to mine, create, deliver, run, maintain, and dispose of. In this way, money is ultimately a direct claim on energy and resources. Our economic stories assert that with more money, we can create more of anything. The truth is, we cannot create energy. We both extract it and burn it faster by using technology and printing money. Natural capital, particularly energy, is the true foundation of our monetary systems. As we create more money, we don't create more resources. We merely access them faster. The highest sustained growth rate of human economies ever before and likely ever again peaked 50 years ago when oil production growth was at its highest. But rather than living within our means, we found creative ways to extend growth for a while longer. We created complex supply chains, outsourcing the heavy lifting to countries with cheaper labor. We turned to debt in a large way to maintain high levels of consumption, a behavior that accelerated in 2008 and has gone into overdrive since 2020. Debt allows us to spend resources from the future and call it economic growth. This phenomenon has become so pervasive in the last 50 years that we think it's normal to consume today and pay tomorrow. The developed world is now using debt to enable the extraction of things we couldn't otherwise afford to extract, to produce things we otherwise couldn't afford to consume. This strategy has an expiration date because all this new money will one day be spent on real things requiring energy. Enabled by an extraordinary but temporary energy surplus, the human economy is now over 1,000 times bigger than it was just 5 centuries ago. Most of the benefits of this one-time geological surplus now flow to a fraction of people, not to the rest of living humans, nor future generations. As we extract minerals and burn fossil carbon to support modern living standards, their waste streams are in turn diminishing the life support systems of other species and future beings. The impact of our global energy metabolism on nature has been tragic and is now accelerating, resulting in, among other things, animal, bird, and fish populations dropping by 50% since the 1970s, plastic now weighing more than all animals on land and in the sea, and a child born today being expected to outlive Earth's coral reefs. As a culture, we have recently, but almost entirely, financialized the human experience. Not only have we parsed the rich fabric of human life into a single monetary marker, but in doing so, we've used the wrong prices. The price of money is wrong because we grow it with a keystroke with no tether to finite natural capital. The price of energy is wrong because we don't treat it as the extraordinary, irreplaceable resource it is, non-renewable on any human timescale. And in setting prices on everything, we've lost sight of the large cost their use has on Earth's ecosystems. This biophysical story is all connected in an emergent and unexpected way. As the carbon pulse boosted our economies, our institutions and governments self-organized around expectations of growth. Now, 8 billion members of a social species collectively seek profits, which are linked to energy, which is linked to fossil hydrocarbons and minerals. Growth, as measured by increases in GDP, is now required for stability. We have arrived at a place where we as a culture have outsourced our decisions and planning to the financial system. The market's compulsion to grow now outcompetes any alternative paths of wisdom or constraint. The system is no longer in anyone's control. The human species, at least to this point, has become a mindless, insatiable, energy-hungry superorganism. The superorganism is an emergent phenomenon of the animals that comprise it, us. Human beings are related to all other creatures on Earth. We are the product of an unbroken chain connecting to the first life, which means that hidden beneath our stated motivations of what we do every day in industrial society, we are driven to pursue the same neurochemical brain rewards our ancestors pursued. This has huge implications for our behaviors, our economies, and our futures. Reaching for our phone to see if someone liked our Facebook post or to see if Bitcoin is up or down aren't really our goals. We are in reality just seeking the same brain rewards that led to success for our hunter-gatherer ancestors. Dopamine is a molecule that in animals and in humans leads to motivation and action. In a materially rich modern world, the habituation to the action of consumption leads to the wanting of things culture-wide being stronger than the reward we get from having them. This is a fundamental problem for an economic system that's turning billions of barrels of oil into microliters of dopamine. As a carryover from ancestral tribal life, we are highly tuned to social signals, comparing ourselves to others, seeking approval, acceptance, and jockeying for status. With material and now digital wealth as today's primary status signal, consumerism is now largely based on having as much or more than those around us, rather than focusing on what we may actually need. Modern humans are still tribal beings. We staunchly support those in our in-groups and easily ostracize out-groups, from trivial divisions like sports teams to political affiliation, race, or nationality. Our evolution has primed us to blame other humans for situations we don't like or understand. We have rich, creative, and colorful imaginations that reside in the virtual worlds of our minds. The human brain can imagine and verbalize limitless combinations of physical impossibilities, sustainable outposts on Mars, self-perpetuating energy machines, and an economy based on physical consumption growing continually for centuries. In ancestral times, these virtual worlds overlapped with the physical worlds we inhabited, making us more content and effective as a tribal unit. But in a culture of vast material wealth, information overload, and social media, it's increasingly difficult for us to separate fantasy from reality. When these individual virtual worlds connect with the virtual worlds of others, the result is widespread shared beliefs that money is real, that our current wealth is due mostly to our cleverness, and that technology will lead to limitless growth. When we look to others to try and understand our complex modern world, as social beings, who said it becomes more important than logic or the quality of the evidence. Celebrity and group affiliation now matter more than truth. Our Stone Age brains are no match for the social media algorithms that now constantly hijack our attention. modern media outlets prey on our evolutionary inclinations for novelty and in-group defense via capturing our attention and turning clicks and shares into consumption. Computer algorithms optimized for profit are splintering our society by reducing attention spans, accelerating addiction, polarization, apathy, and mistrust in science. A metaphorical technology worm driven by exponentially improving artificial intelligence is silently eating our minds. Humans are creatures with finite lifespans. The future is not a priority to us emotionally. Instead, we are focused on the very short term, this weekend's plans, this quarter's earnings, this term's election, the next set of compelling images we're urged to scroll to. We often promise to make big changes starting tomorrow, until tomorrow becomes today, and the cycle repeats, delaying any actual change. Like other biological organisms, humans seek gains and are averse to losses. We look for undervalued stocks to invest in, sales on new shoes, or 2-for-1 cocktails at happy hour. Unlike squirrels or cheetahs, we are an extremely social species. We coordinate as families, small businesses, corporations, and nation states to maximize our virtual surplus, dollars, which we then spend on real things. Our core economic and environmental challenges stem from a mismatch of hunter-gatherer minds inhabiting a competitive consumer growth culture. Together, these human universals have led to incentives and behaviors which have created a metabolic superorganism whose objective is disconnected from the well-being of its parts, us. It is tempting to look at how we live today and conclude that this is how humans are. But modern society is only a single brief example out of thousands of successful arrangements in human history. Humans alive today don't choose to be hierarchical or greedy. Many of our choices are constrained by the economic system we were born into. Our current high consumption, high inequality, high technological distraction, and low levels of daily human connection are a direct product of the carbon pulse. Though human brains don't change quickly, under the right circumstances, our behaviors and cultural norms can move at lightning speed. Our species is incredibly adaptive when we're challenged. The way we've been living is an anomaly, but we take it for granted because as individuals, it's all we've ever known. Going forward, a lifestyle adapted to lower energy use will reconnect our virtual and physical worlds. By necessity, our lives will become less global, more interpersonally engaged, and more tethered to natural flows. As a species, a global superorganism is not our destiny. Who we are has brought us to this precipice. Who we are capable of becoming as individuals and as a society will be the question of our time. We are alive at a time of wonder, peril, and possibility. Ahead are a million unknown destinations, some dark and foreboding, and some welcoming and beautiful. Many of us sense that something is different, something is coming, but we lack a shared understanding of the path that brought us here and of the terrain ahead. Which future we expect depends upon which lens we use to see the road. Modern society is polarized, stressed, and overwhelmed with information, good and bad. As a result, common points of view, our lenses, focus on the road just in front of us. For the view to the future, we defer to culturally accepted guides who are confident they know the way forward. Through the lens of an economist, for example, we see a glorious road leading to growth that never stops. Any scarcity of energy or material inputs will be solved by price signals, creating incentives which increase our productivity and growth. The economic lens shows us that human ingenuity and the market will solve everything. A financial lens translates stock markets at all-time highs as a sign of society's health, portending a rich and virtuous future. With enough financial capital, we'll be able to build roads to anywhere. A technology lens promises a shiny road of comfort, novelty, and prosperity, enabled by future inventions. Innovation, artificial intelligence, and a vibrant metaverse will sidestep any energy or resource constraints. We envision future humans breaking free from the confines of Earth and enjoying high-tech lifestyles where the biggest problem is runaway robots. These lenses are all optimistic but misguided. All these lenses are energy blind. The real paths ahead can only be seen by integrating energy awareness with biology, sociology, physics, and everything science has discovered. We need a systems lens to read the map. A systems lens reveals the holistic story that explains humanity's path. In pursuit of the same emotional experiences of our ancient ancestors, we transform materials and energy into technologies that make our lives more comfortable and fun. We keep score of our progress using money, which has become a psychological stand-in for all the things our ancestors valued. The massive scale of humanity's consumption is evidenced by the excess CO2 being absorbed by Earth's oceans and atmosphere. The emergent result is a metabolic superorganism with oil as its hemoglobin, transporting goods through the arteries and veins of a global supply network. Like a shark needing to swim to get oxygen flowing through its gills, our current economic system has an imperative to grow in order to satisfy prior financial commitments. We can't stop, nor can we slow down, or the system will crash. A systems lens reveals that the road ahead is closed to our current cultural expectations, yet we continue to bear down on the accelerator. Wearing systems lenses removes the blind spots created by any single issue lens. Global economic growth will never meaningfully decouple from energy consumption. It cannot, because the world's GDP, by definition, has always been a proxy for how much energy we burn. If we were to grow the global economy at 3% a year, as most governments and institutions expect, we would use as much energy and materials in the next 30 years as we have in the past 10,000. Stock markets are poor guideposts for prosperity when inflated by government and central bank support. All the cash, stocks, bonds, and pension funds in the world will need energy and materials to be cashed out and turned into real wealth. Creativity and innovation will be central to human futures, but modern technology requires huge amounts of energy to build and to operate. As long as GDP is our goal, efficiency gains from new technology will serve the superorganism. Transitioning from fossil hydrocarbon to rebuildable energy won't change this dynamic. Ultimately, in addition to using different energy, we'll need to use energy differently. Seeing our future through a systems lens changes everything. We have spent the last century harnessing enormous amounts of fossil energy to build a world of complexity like nothing seen before. In the coming century, humanity will experience a great simplification. There will always be energy on Earth as long as the sun burns. But the amount of surplus energy available to human societies will soon be diminishing. As the extraction of geologically stored energy becomes more difficult, everything we're used to in society will become more costly or less available. We are not planning for this because it's never happened before. The onset of the Great Simplification will be financial and economic turbulence, followed by contraction. When we can no longer grow fast enough to maintain all the increased financial claims, economies will recede to a scale that can again be supported by physical flows without credit. Complex global supply chains, the related high consumption lifestyles, and many of the conveniences and freedoms we take for granted in this era of abundant energy surplus will diminish. The ensuing simplification will be among the most significant events ever experienced by our species. Those who look through a systems lens can serve as early visionaries of a simpler life, with new ways of relating to technology, to consumption, to each other, and to Earth's ecosystems. There are many pathways wending through a great simplification. Some are wise, humane, and even preferable to what we have now. Some are so dark as to be nearly unthinkable. Yet it is precisely thinking about these pathways and actively choosing among them which offers the only realistic hope for a long and meaningful human future. Nature has gifted us with a productive and beautiful home, the ability to understand how we got here, and the creativity to imagine which paths are possible. The future need not be dystopian, but cleverness alone will no longer suffice for the next leg of our journey. We will need imagination, foresight, empathy, and above all, wisdom to navigate the path to the future that is arriving. The Great Simplification.
Wow, thank you. Thank you, Nate. That was incredible.
Hello, Discover Card here to
Oh,
explain
sorry,
our
let me turn off my
cashback
YouTube.
match. We match all of the cashback you earn at the end.
Sorry for that. Automatic ads playing. Speaking of some of the issues we're facing in this world, I was just really struck by some of the powerful images, that you can put in video as a medium. I particularly enjoyed the pathways at the end and the people worshiping at the geyser of energy/money. But Nate, I know you wanted to share a few thoughts about the framework you used for the film now, so I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Laura. That was actually the first time I ever watched that without the music. I think because you did it on YouTube, that it cut out the music. It still made sense, and in some ways it might have been more educational, but I think the emotional arc was probably missing. I think I know most people on this call. I think you all probably understand this story. And what I wanted to share isn't so much a framework about the movie, but a framework of what the content implies for our work going forward. So I just have a short slide presentation. Can you see this? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, so here, what do we do? All right. I mean, how do we think about the future? Yes, we can understand how energy, money, economic growth, human behavior, planetary externalities are ongoing. How should we think about the future? So I'm just going to go through this real fast and then we can have a discussion. Um, as I mentioned earlier, a conventional orthodox economic theory has found to be lacking. Many of you know the total flaws both in microeconomics and macroeconomics. I think our system is actually quite simple. We take energy and materials, we combine it into technology and products. We create dollars to or euros or yen as financial markers. We do all this to generate the same emotional states of our ancestors and create waste in the doing so. So there was a cultural anthropologist, Marvin Harris, studied a lot of historical cultures, and he found that every historical culture had three layers that were integrated simultaneously. One was the superstructure, which was the beliefs and ideologies and organizing ideas. One was the structure, which was the economic systems, the laws, the rules, and underpinning it all was the infrastructure, was the energy and material input, the waste removal, the environment, etc. Um, this is something that a lot of people today talking about what the world should be forget about what is. And so we have to deal with that. So with this framing, let me offer how I think about a framework for solutions. And I no longer use the word solutions. I think solutions implies that we have a problem that can be solved, and it's kind of a linear way of thinking. There are responses ahead, lots of responses. Nothing will solve the problem we have, but there's millions of smaller things that in aggregate can mitigate the default pathway ahead of us. So the way that I think about it is there are kind of three planes here. One is on the global and national scale, and each of these three planes has three subsets. One is we simply need to change the education system. Our culture is energy blind because we're ecology blind. Energy ultimately is a part of ecology, and we need to train and educate young people, even grade school kids, about the coming reality. And our colleges right now are teaching mostly trivia for that was relevant the past 50 years that will be less relevant in the next 50. I think we need to change, at least have a parallel path, aspiration away from GDP towards well-being, and what really matters to our citizens and the ecosystems. And then we need to change the signals, the incentives. We're using the wrong prices in many different ways. And so there is this global, national, culture-wide list of things to do. There's also things at the community and local level. The most important recommendation that I give to people now is no matter what future arrives, we need to be more tethered with other people. We need to build social capital, social networks, and that will act as a stability bridge to any of these futures that are coming. And right now we're so rich, at least in the global north, that we can get on the computer and order things that show up with a brown truck, and we don't need our neighbors. We are going to need people again very soon. We need to also change the infrastructure from a 6-continent global supply chain for everything to maybe using that for luxury goods and key things, but all the basic things we're going to need to change how we think about how we get those. And then finally, locally, we're going to need to think about different scenarios. I don't think anyone, including and especially me, knows what is going to happen. I am much more personally confident about what's not going to happen. And what's not going to happen is continued economic growth for much longer. So having conversations with people about scenarios in your local community is important. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, when you hear about the Great Simplification, when you look at what's happening in the world, there is, I mean, we have to figure out how to cope with this as individuals. Meditation, eating better, spending time in nature, exercising, having joy in your life instead of all this stress, ways to thrive, being alive, being human during this time, and ways to engage with the meta crisis and the human predicament, which actually helps us thrive. Many of you on this call have known me for a very long time. I left Wall Street 20 years ago. I've never been happier than I am now. I don't make much money, but I get paid in other things. I get paid in education and camaraderie and talking to you all, ecological economics experts who are fighting on the good side of the humans alive today. So I think all these things need to, that's how I envision the future. So getting back to this though, we have three different categories: the superstructure, structure, and infrastructure. And then there's also different timelines, right? We have the long term, which is, 2050. We have the transition period of the next 10 to 30 years, but there's also a triage on how we're probably not going to choose to degrow. Degrowth is going to happen involuntarily. Look at Germany and Europe and Japan as an example right now. So I have these timelines and the areas of intervention. And I think there's not so many people working on the triage categories. And if you make this a three-dimensional cube, which I didn't have time for this morning, but if you think of another dimension, everyone cares about something different, right? And we can't just say, here's the prescription, here's what we do. Some people care about themselves and their families, others about their community or their culture or nation or the whole world or other intergenerational aspects or other species and ecosystems. Like I know people that don't care much about humans that are doing all they can to save the oceans for other complex life like cetaceans, but other people don't care about that at all. So there is a wide net. And my reason for saying all this is a future ecosystem is going to get the same or even better feelings, drives, and culture with less waste and hopefully less, not hopefully, definitively less energy and materials. And the reason I'm saying all this is I believe ecological economics, or whatever you call it, the research discipline projects under the broad tent that I've come to see as biophysical ecological economics, is the only discipline that can integrate all these time scales, all these superstructure, structure, and infrastructure. And with that, I will close and take questions and thank you all for your continued fighting for the good team.
Well, thanks so much, Nate. That was fascinating. And I apologize that you all did not get to hear the music
You
with
seem
the
to be
video.
on mute, Laura. I can't quite hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I
Okay.
can hear you fine, Laura.
Okay, great.
Yeah, and Nate mentioned not being able to hear the music. I heard the music fine. It was very emotionally charging. Did
Oh,
anyone-
great.
Well, maybe it's on my end then.
Okay,
I'm
that
sorry.
actually makes me feel better. But Nate, can you
Now
hear
I
me
hear
now?
you. Now I can hear you.
Okay, perfect. All right. That makes me feel a lot better
I
because the
just
music
got
was so
a a snap view of my PhD advisor briefly. But go on, Laura.
That's great. I'm glad you all got to hear the music because I agree that was a very powerful component of the film. So I would love to open it up for questions for Nate. Maybe I can just start out. So Nate, obviously you spent time in academia, and you have now moved into, telling stories in this visual way and in the film way. I'm curious, what are some of the lessons that you've learned about communicate? Because there was a lot of science in there's a lot of research in your film, but it was communicated in this compelling, story-driven way. What are some of the things that you've learned doing that maybe we who are in academia or scholars could learn from the act of storytelling in a visual medium like film?
Thank you. I've learned long ago that most people between the age of 20 and 70 are so busy with their own careers and building their identity and stuff that I decided to go teach college and talk to retired politicians. So I'm doing the under 20 and over 70. And then building on that, I really think that our societal attention span is dwindling by the year because of the exponential social media tech. So I think videos and really colorful, emotional things are the only path to reach a lot of people. I recently did an Earth Day talk last month where one of my students created 80 tarot cards. And what I did is I applied ecological economics concepts into different tarot cards. And it wasn't as viewed as this, but it was a way to open a window into someone's limbic system, that when you use visuals and music, it opens this gateway into a different part of your brain that allows people to think about things differently. It's what Donella Meadows said about systems. The system isn't to give you the answer. It's a tool to help your brain think about things differently. So art and music are kind of a sort of a system, because humans were humans first and scientists only far later. And so emotion, color, vision, imagination are much closer to the brainstem than just academic papers. Academic papers are necessary as the foundation of the logic that then should go in there. And I think we've arrived at a critical juncture in society where we need much more translation and science communication to reach orders of magnitude more people.
Yeah, I totally agree. Thank you. Do any others have questions for Nate? Yeah, Chris.
Yeah, I'm curious, like a very popular narrative right now is that oil is bad because of the carbon emissions. And I feel like you almost didn't mention carbon emissions at all in that video, and are presenting a very different way to look at oil, that there's this concern about the supply of it, that we have a though at the rate that we're using it, we have like a 200-year span that we can have oil and then it's gone, and that's not a sustainable system, and that we're going to need to reckon with what this transition looks like. But it's a transition that's forced from a supply side and not from a pollution side. I'm curious, like how communicating that tends to go, whether there's like confusion over that, or like if you've found a way to talk about that is like clear or engaging for people that maybe haven't interfaced with these ideas before.
Thanks, Chris. Are you the guy that I talked to on the phone in Portland, Oregon? Okay, nice to see you. So that's an excellent question. The answer is that I'm building a website called Energy Blind, and going to have some tight messaging on how our society misunderstands energy. I think the Ukraine-Russia situation is causing people to become less energy blind. And I think, the core tribe is the environmentalists and those who care about future generations and the climate and other species. That is my tribe. So ultimately, I care most about climate change, but there are millions of people working on that. And there are not that many people working on explaining the infrastructure and how we are totally swimming in a sea of energy like a fish swims in water, and we're oblivious to it. Look what is happening in Germany right now and France. They're gearing up, adding to coal because they have to, because Russia is shutting off natural gas exports. So this is the greenest political, governments in the world are now turning to coal. And my fear is that as oil, particularly the master resource, declines, and the oil situation is much more precarious than most people know. In the United States, over 50% of our oil is now shale oil, which is the source rock. If the United States stopped drilling for environmental reasons or for any other reason, our oil production would decline 41% the first year, and 26% the second year, and 22% the year after, plus or minus. So the environmental community needs to integrate this into their thinking. I'm not so sure they will. I think a lot, I mean, I will just speak frankly here, Chris. I think a lot of people in the environmental community aren't, the ultimate, the proximate goal is saving the climate and the environment. The ultimate goal is having a tribe and an identity associated with being on the right side. We're going to have to use less energy, and we're going to have lower income. So I don't know the answers, but to answer your question in a long-winded way, people that are trying to understand our situation appreciate the energy aspect. I think people in the environmental community tend to think that I'm in the pockets of fossil fuel companies or something, because they don't understand why I would talk so glowingly about the benefits we get from fossil fuels. But we have to tell the whole story. The whole story does fit together. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, Nate, I found that really compelling when you were saying like there's many pathways into which people can join this, transition in a way that's, it's, if you care about the whales, great. If you care about your community, great. I mean, we're all kind of on the same side here. I hope we can realize that. Madhav, go ahead.
Thank you, Laura. Nate, that was a great, very powerful the video. I teach like 2 courses in sustainability at Florida International University, and I can definitely use this video as a kind of a motivational piece. I have a comment and a question. So in your video, you have used a lot of powerful parallels and contrasts. One that really jumped at me was the one towards the end of the video, and where the man with the backpack, initially first he walks in an unknown, world, where hills, with a kind of unclear, future, like a cloudy, scene in the front, and then after a few minutes, the same man walks, along with or in a community of people, children, animals, playing around, and that contrast to me, is really a nice way of presenting the contrasting world. And thank you for that. And my question is, so a lot of times we as environmental professionals, practitioners, we talk to, preach to the choir, right? A lot of times that's what happens. And in your video, you have used, the logo of some of the powerful companies, corporations in the like Apple and other companies. I was wondering if you have tried to pitch this video to some of the big corporations, because a lot of corporations these days are do care about the environment. They have this corporate social responsibility, mandate or expectation. I was wondering if this video could make on their list of promotionals, if you will.
Thank you. And I hope you can use this video for your students. Real quickly on the final scene, I was out of budget and I was out of time. I wasn't super happy with representing the Great Simplification with a golden retriever and a soccer ball, but we were out of budget, and the first half of the movie was excellent, and then the rest was kind of like B. But thank you. I think one of the problems is everyone on this call understands that ecological economics We're not designing widgets and better products that will sell and go viral. We're telling a story that is essential for society's future, but that people don't really want to hear. So we don't have slick marketing or technology experts to help us with Zoom webinars or PR budgets to show this movie to people. I have a zero social media budget. So I've only just done this through word of mouth, and it's been out a month and had 30,000 views. A couple of very high level people, like a billionaire, has contacted me after he saw the movie and wants to talk about it. The amount of influence that marketing and advertising have on our culture is unbelievable and underappreciated. So somehow we need to tell the truth, but there's a trade-off between being accurate, which is, as ecological economists, what we try to do, and being helpful. So I'm trying to split the difference and be generally accurate, but also helpful to people's lives about what's coming. And as far as corporations are miniature superorganisms. We could talk about triple bottom line as long as we want, but if you're a CEO of a public company and you decide to use less energy, to use less environmental impact, that's going to eventually impact your profits, and your shareholders will vote you out and get some other CEO. So we need to change the system first before that dynamic would change. So I think corporation CEOs watching this movie as human beings can like it, can appreciate it, can understand it, and it might move them. But when they wear their hat as a C-suite executive at a company, their hands are kind of tied because they are embedded in the superorganism the same way that all of us are.
Meenakshi, you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Laura, and thank you, Nate. It's a wonderful video. I cannot appreciate it enough. You mentioned that we need to talk to our friends and family. First of all, we are a small tribe, and we all acknowledge that, right? We all acknowledge that a great simplification must come. First of all, when do you think it's coming? Second, when you talk about talking with friends and family, and I find even students, friends and family here in the United States, friends and family elsewhere in the world, no one wants this. No one wants to lower their needs. Everybody, when they hear people like us talking, they think it is, they fear their lives, they fear their quality of lives or what they aspire to be. People in working actively in the field of climate change and resilience, they will personally not want a lower quality of life, which involves lower energy. Where do you see this coming? I mean to say, I feel the frustration sometimes, I feel the despondence sometimes, but it's a question, a hard question we always keep asking. I don't mean to sound, totally unoptimistic, but where do you see this happening? And, a lot of questions about how do we get about it?
Yeah, thank you. Your name, how do you say your name?
Meenakshi.
Meenakshi, thank you for your question. First of all, I don't know what's going to happen in the future. I think the great simplification is the opposite of the great complexification of us adding vast amounts of stored sunlight the last century or two, and so it will unfold over the next century or two. In my parlance, I view it as the amount of financial claims versus the deteriorating amount of natural capital, that divergence will happen this decade, I think. And it's already starting to, in countries that have to import a lot of energy, like Japan and Europe, that divergence is already accelerating. I would guess within the next 5 years, there's going to be this financial recalibration. I don't think we're going to choose this. It's going to happen. And if you really understand human biology and the human brain, we as a culture will not do anything massive ahead of time. We will not vote to keep carbon in the ground. We will not choose as a society to consume less to save the environment. So if you really understand that, then you know that that is giving you a gift of time to personally, in a community way and in your professional work, to meet the future halfway. And I think what's coming is largely unavoidable, but the response to it is not unavoidable. So our role, I think, is to change the initial conditions of when that moment happens, for ourselves, for where we live, and for our entire culture. And there's a million ways to do that. There's not one answer. And frankly, I don't know the answers. I know the problems and challenges quite well, but that doesn't really qualify me to know the solutions, other than we are going to have to use less energy and material and have a larger percentage of our portfolio of daily experiences be with the things that our ancestors got for free, which is our interaction with nature and with other humans. And technology and high energy throughput stuff is going to become less available. That's your work. That's all of our work, is to figure out frameworks for how to help society navigate that.
Thank you. I really like the way that you said that we have to change the initial conditions when we are in that transition. Thank you again.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and Nate, at the end of the film, I thought the really powerful image was kind of the three roads, the one, that's closed, which is the way we've been going, and then the two, options on either side, one of which is, as you said, very dark, and the other of which, I forget the words you used to describe it, something like humane and just, and in some ways even better than what we have now. And so I'm wondering if there are particular thinkers or communities or places you look to who are articulating what that type of future might look like. You say that it could look like a number of things, but are there people that you look to who are kind of showing us how we can simplify in a humane and just and beautiful way?
Well, I wish we had more examples of that. But here's some thoughts. I just read a book called A Paradise Built in Hell. And Rebecca Solnit is the author. And she catalogs that when things get tough, when there are crises, people there's this welling up of humanity and cooperation. And I expect that's going to happen. And I would like to seed that so that it happens more often. If you look at places in Ghana right now that are super poor, they will unplug their water desal hookups at the risk of, not desal, but decontamination, at the risk of getting dangerous diarrhea, to connect to their phone so they can connect with people. And they have a fraction of the energy that we use, and they have poor but vibrant interactions and meaning and lives. We have to differentiate between financial economic poverty and life poverty, because there's a lot of communities in the United States that are extremely financially poor, but in some ways their social capital is higher than wealthy Americans. So I think we need examples all over the world. And it's a hard question to answer. I'm hopeful, and we need a lot more people living differently, and then marketing and communicating and advertising this other path. And I think the world has converged on the story that ecological economists have been saying for a generation. That world is now here. People recognize that something is off and something is coming. And so now I think it's really, we know the science. Now it's a communication and living it and being the change, I think is the next path.
Absolutely. I would say that, that recognition, at least as it sounds like you're a teacher as well, that recognition that we're running ourselves off a cliff is, I think, the dominant view among young people for sure these days. Rigo, yeah.
So I see that my PhD advisor has asked a question in the chat.
Okay,
The
well, you
framing of
better
this
answer that first, I guess, and then we'll go to Rigo.
Okay, a framing of this conference is building a post-COVID society. What do I think the main lessons were from society's response to the pandemic? What might be long-lasting? Well, from a macro standpoint, one of the lessons is we will continue to kick every can that we can to keep the system stable and growing. So we reduced emissions, no planes in the sky, and then 2 years later, we're setting all-time highs for coal in the world. Germany, a leading environmental country, is importing coal and restarting coal plants. So one lesson is the superorganism was not fatally wounded by COVID. On an individual level, a lot of people, at least I can speak to the United States, got a little bit of a wake-up call that to make a lot of money isn't the only goal in life. And I know a lot of people personally, not in our tribe, that are now making 80% of what they were making before COVID, but they're working from home. They spend more time in nature with their families, and they're so happy with that trade-off. So I think that little kernel of learning is something that could be sustained. That's my short answer, John.
Thanks. Rigo, go ahead.
Hi, Nate. I feel like I've seen this video before. I like the 5-minute when you cut it in different, like, smaller pieces, just because, like you were saying, the attention span of people might not be that long for 30, but you still can get the message across in all the different separations of them. I was just gonna say that, yeah, like what you're talking about, this self-reinforcing expansionary superorganism, economic superorganism that it's trying to maintain itself, is very hard to break away from, right? In many ways, some people might say that is very deterministic, the way it is co-evolving. But I was just gonna point out that, when you think about, what do we do? This might seem hopeless. We maybe, are we gonna stop cutting on climate change? I can think of examples such as Costa Rica, Uruguay, where have very, very high standards of living, using very little energy compared to the United States and Europeans per capita. United States consumes around 300 gigajoules per capita. Europeans have 150 gigajoules per capita, and they consume very little. I think it's like around, I forgot the exact number, but it's way less than the Europeans. And so what do you think about that? And what do you think about the fact that, for example, in the United States, a lot of the energy that we consume is waste? I understand there's a lot of complexity in the system, and as you go transforming energy, there is energy that has to be used up to get to the next transformation. But honest to God, like, a lot of the energy that we're consuming is to waste and doesn't go to improving any well-being. I mean, it does improve some well-being, but a lot of it is waste. And I can think of the 800 billion military budget, right? That I guess in some ways it provides employment to, I don't know how many people were saying, 4 million people in the United States, but it is a massive sink of energy that I just want you to think about, to talk about this waste of energy that we could easily take away from the system if we become, obviously not just becoming efficient, but on top of it, learning how to be sufficient, right? Living with less is better.
Right. So the history of the last 50 years is we've become more efficient and less resilient. And the history of the last 200 years is we've gotten more efficient over time, but the correlation between energy and GDP is over 0.99. So we continue to use more and more energy. I think innovation and efficiency will be really important in the future. But if we become more efficient now, that extra energy is just going to be thrown into the gaping maw of the superorganism. So we need to change the cultural aspirations. And I think that's only going to happen in a crisis. And after we change our cultural aspirations, potentially towards a parallel path of well-being, instead of, or the old GPI statistic, then efficiency could be a real good thing and help us. But right now, it's actually making us more brittle the more efficient we get. So I think that we need kind of like a Jevons paradox escape hatch, where we take profits from some process or some venture, and instead of funneling those profits back into the financial maw of the superorganism, we take the profits from a technology or an investment and we redistribute them to have local energy and decentralized food and supply chains in northern Vermont, as one example, instead of putting it back into the global superorganism. So you're right. Eventually, I mean, this is the good news, right? Is we only need a fraction of this energy to live good and meaningful lives. But distribution has become a huge problem. Look at what's happening in Laos and Sri Lanka this week, because they can't print their own currency and don't have their own energy the way that we do. And so there's going to be a large standard deviation of responses globally to what's coming. But I think humans are problem solvers, and we always have solved problems using more energy. I think the next big can to kick isn't finding fossil fuels or globalization or central banks or credit. It's in our minds. It's in a recognition. We're the first generation of our species to be able to understand the things that we're discussing on this call. And we don't need all this energy and material throughput to be happy. And so I think the next can to kick is a possibly, hopefully, one of a cultural evolution, where we had to experience the horror of the carbon pulse to understand what we're doing and what we need and what paths are forward. And so I'm hopeful of that. But to me, efficiency in the Amory Levin's Bible is actually hurting us now. It's not helping us.
Thanks, Nate. Yeah, the transformation of consciousness you're talking about puts me in mind of John Gowdy's work, where he demonstrates that, empathy and collaboration and selflessness are just as intrinsic to human nature as, greed and individualism. It's just that capitalism prioritizes the latter. Yeah, Matt, go ahead.
Thank you. Let me lower my hand. So thanks, Nate. This is great. I really appreciate all the work, especially around bringing attention to the notion of being energy blind. Couple of things. So you're really clearly focusing on how to communicate this information, which is so key. And that's also what Rigo is doing, and many of us are doing. I'm involved also with leadership for the Ecozoic at UVM. And in my work, especially looking at like just transitions, for example, you talk about your tribe. I find the same type of dynamics happening among talking to folks among who I consider my tribe, right? And the same type of response that you indicated, right? Like being accused of being promoting continuation of fossil fuels, or anti-technology, or whatever the accusation is. But I just wonder if you could offer a little more reflection on how you've been able to communicate effectively among people who are already generally sympathetic with the overall goal to get away from fossil fuels, but not necessarily understanding the implications in that sort of systemic way that you described. And then I think the second part, just really briefly, I have two kids who are very much under that 20 age mark, that threshold that you described earlier. And I'm doing my best as a father to, I'm not even going to get into the hope and despair in that issue, but just to bring some clarity about the condition that we're in, and the fact that they are growing up into a very unusual culture, a very anomalous condition, right? And just to try to, as they're coming into their own as young adults, trying to understand how they fit into this world, and not really hearing it from anyone else except for their crazy dad, who's saying, this is a really weird time that you're living in, right? And everybody else sees it as normal. So I just wonder how you've been able to communicate, especially to that younger generation, and take whichever of both of those you care to.
Thank you. I will speak to both of them. A few days ago, I made an energy blind just rant. I just posted it in the chat here. I have found that this is why I started the podcast. Is I wanted to build a tribe of people that were fluent in how all these things fit together. Invariably, I find that people largely fall into two camps. One is technology and market and Elon Musk devotees that the market and economics will solve everything. And the other, unfortunately, many of these people follow me, are the absolute certain doomers that we are headed for Mad Max collapse. And I think both of those camps have a similar personality that doom or market will solve it, obviate any need for personal response or behavior change. And I'm quite certain that the truth is in the middle and that the future will be darker than the average person expects, but probably brighter than many of us fear. And so that's where I'm trying to communicate to those people that will listen. And those people on the other sides, I used to try to have a message that appeals to everyone. It is impossible to have a message that appeals to everyone. This movie that you just watched is about the best that I could do, but I'm trying to appeal to people like you that are conscientious, that are both intelligent and wise, and who care about the future. As to your kids, my next project is 8 to 10 hours of very short videos. We have 177 3 to 4 minute videos planned. That's my college course for young people. And a big part of it at the end is coping, thriving, and engaging and how to be alive at this time, because it starts there. You can't hear this message and just say you're supposed to buy an electric vehicle and add solar panels to your house, and that's the extent of the answer. And the more young people we get understanding this and talking about it and making it okay to talk about this, I think you have to be as honest as possible with your kids, unless you happen to be one of those doomers that says we're screwed and there's nothing we can do. Then I think it's child abuse to tell your kids this story. But I think you have to be honest. We need equalate young humans that understand the stuff that as ecological economists we understand, and we can't lie to them or hide the truth. We massively underestimate teenagers in our culture, and 13, 14, 15, 60-year-olds, they are so smart and they feel this anyway. So I think we have to be honest.
Yeah, I empathize with that. I have my children a bit younger, they're 10 and 4, but yeah, I think honesty is, the one thing I've definitely learned in talking to kids at where they're at. Any other questions for Nate? I know we're getting close to noon and it's a beautiful Friday in June, at least where I'm at.
I just have a quick comment.
It's 106 degrees where I am.
Oh, goodness. Okay.
I just have a quick proposition to all of you, especially for the U.S. Society for Ecological Economics, that I think that we should work towards coordinating and collaborating in creating a sort of a meeting in which we invite as many politicians as possible. But it doesn't have to be days long. It can be one day in Washington, D.C. or something, to get them to get this information, to almost like a teaching in ecological economics that for politicians. And because at this point, I do think politicians are the leverage point, that if you get some of them to start to think about these limits to growth long-term, all these things colliding in the 1930s, in the 2030s, I think it will be really a good thing that we could do, right away. And we'll see. But
yeah, that's a great suggestion, Rigo. And yeah, go ahead, Nate.
I can speak to that. One of our initiatives is called Advanced Policy, and I have regular talks with 25 former senators, governors, congressmen on exactly this. I disagree that telling current politicians this is the leverage point. I think we have to inform them about the backdrop and give them blueprints, break glass in case of emergency plans for when there's a crisis, how you can do this. I mean, look at how left-leaning and progressive and caring about all the things that we care about on this call, the Biden administration is, but yet they're doing everything in service of the superorganism. So they are kind of in thrall to the growing superorganism. What needs to happen is they need to have a platform and a constituency and a blueprint for what needs to happen in the coming decade. And that, I agree with you, is very important.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's a fantastic idea. And maybe we can work together, Nate. I mean, one of the things I would say too is to not neglect local scale and community leaders in that, because there's a lot of things that can be done on that scale that I think we sometimes neglect when we're talking about policy. Well, with that, I would like to once again thank Nate for that fantastic film and discussion. It was really wonderful, and I'm definitely going to use it with my students. And I just want to thank all of you for participating in this conference. I think that, we're a small group, but the quality of the discussions has just been fantastic this week. I've learned so much, and I appreciate all the perspectives and solutions that you all have brought to the table. So thank you very much. Please look for future communications from the U.S. Society for Ecological Economics. Continue to engage with us on social media. I know that we should use it judiciously, as Nate's film just pointed out, but we do use that to share stories of hope and some of the amazing work you all are doing as well. So please continue to engage with us there. Thank you all very much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend and spend time in nature and with your loved ones, and have a wonderful weekend. Bye, everyone.